A retired assassin disappeared to Alaska to stop killing, until they took her daughter. The satellite phone's shrill ring cut through the Alaskan silence like a blade through flesh. Vera Blackwood froze, her coffee mug halfway to her lips, steam curling into the sub-zero air of her remote cabin. In 3 years of self-imposed exile, that phone had never rung. She set down the mug with deliberate calm, muscle memory from another life taking over. The phone sat on her rough-hewn table like a coiled snake, its red light blinking with each ring. Outside, wind howled across the tundra, rattling the reinforced windows she'd installed herself. On the 5th ring, she answered. Blackwood. Her voice was steady, professional. The old voice. Hello, Phoenix. The code name hit her like a physical blow. Only 3 people had ever known it, and 2 were supposed to be dead. The 3rd. Hello, Director Kane. She moved to the window, scanning the endless white expanse. Nothing moved except snow devils dancing across the permafrost. I thought you'd retired. Retirement's a luxury for people like us. You know that. Kane's voice carried the weight of years and too many difficult decisions. I need you to listen carefully. Your daughter is in danger. Vera's hand tightened on the phone. I don't have a daughter. Autumn Mackenzie. 16 years old. Lives in Fairbanks with her adoptive family. Ring any bells? The name hit her harder than Kane's greeting had. She'd chosen it herself, whispering it to a baby she'd held for exactly 17 minutes before placing her in the social worker's arms. The autumn of 2008. A different life, a different world. That was closed. Sealed records. How do you? The Kozlov syndicate found her. Ice formed in Vera's veins that had nothing to do with the temperature. Viktor Kozlov. The arms dealer she'd eliminated in Prague 7 years ago. Apparently, his organization had longer memories than she'd given them credit for. What do they want? What they've always wanted. You. But since you disappeared, they've decided your daughter makes suitable bait. Vera closed her eyes, seeing again that tiny face, those impossibly small fingers that had gripped hers with surprising strength. She'd made the hardest decision of her life that day, believing it would keep the child safe, that her world of violence and shadows would never touch an innocent life she'd helped create. Where is she now? Missing. Taken from her high school 3 days ago. We've been tracking the Kozlovs' communications. They're holding her somewhere in the interior, waiting for word that you've surfaced. And if I don't? Kane's silence stretched for long seconds. You know the answer to that. Vera stared out at the wilderness that had been her sanctuary, her prison, her penance. She'd built this life deliberately, remote, disconnected, peaceful. She chopped wood, fished through ice, read books by firelight. She'd convinced herself she was healing, growing beyond the weapon she'd once been. But some things lived deeper than conscious choice. Send me everything you have, she said, already moving toward the hidden panel behind her bookshelf. Vera, the girl doesn't know about you. The Mackenzies told her that her birth mother died in childbirth. Good. Let's keep it that way. She ended the call and opened the panel. Inside, weapons, cash, documents, and all the tools of a trade she'd sworn to abandon. The Glock 19 felt strange in her hand after 3 years, heavier than she remembered but perfectly balanced. Some knowledge lived in the bones, apparently. Her secure email chimed. Kane had sent a thick file, photos, maps, intelligence reports, and surveillance footage. She studied the images of Autumn Mackenzie, tall for her age, dark hair like Vera's own, but softer somehow. Innocent. The girl wore a Fairbanks high school jacket and was laughing at something off camera. Her smile was radiant, unshadowed by the violence that had shaped her mother's world. The Kozlov file was thicker and uglier. Viktor's death had created a power vacuum, eventually filled by his nephew Dmitri, younger, more brutal, and carrying a generational grudge. The organization had evolved, becoming more sophisticated but no less vicious. Vera memorized faces, locations, communication patterns. The Kozlovs were professionals, but they'd made one crucial error. They'd threatened the only thing that could bring Phoenix out of retirement. She packed efficiently: winter gear, weapons, medical supplies, and enough cash to disappear again if necessary. The satellite phone went into a reinforced case, along with a tablet loaded with encrypted communication software. As she prepared to leave the cabin that had been her world for 3 years, Vera paused at the mirror by the door. The woman looking back was different from the one who'd first arrived here. Weathered by cold and solitude, marked by the kind of deep exhaustion that comes from carrying too many ghosts. But underneath, something else stirred, something that had been sleeping for 3 years. The mother. She'd never held that title, never earned it through sleepless nights and scraped knees and bedtime stories. But blood called to blood, and some bonds transcended presence. Vera shouldered her pack and stepped into the howling wind. The nearest airstrip was 40 miles south by snowmobile. From there, she could catch a bush pilot to Fairbanks and begin hunting the hunters. The Kozlovs had awakened Phoenix. But more than that, they'd awakened something fiercer and more dangerous than any assassin. They'd awakened a mother protecting her child. The Cessna bounced through turbulence over the interior, its single engine straining against headwinds that would have grounded most aircraft. But Jake Morrison had been flying Alaska's backcountry for 20 years, and he'd learned to read the sky like scripture. Rough weather coming in from the west. He called back to his only passenger. Might want to reconsider whatever you're planning in Fairbanks. Vera adjusted her earphones. I'll manage. Morrison glanced in his mirror at the woman who'd paid him $5,000 in cash for the flight, no questions asked. She looked like she could handle herself, lean, alert, moving with the economy of someone comfortable with violence. He'd flown enough off-the-books passengers to recognize the type. Your funeral, he said, banking toward the lights of Fairbanks scattered across the frozen landscape below. Vera studied the city sprawling beneath them. Somewhere down there, a 16-year-old girl was being held by people who killed as casually as they breathed. Every hour of delay potentially meant the difference between rescue and recovery. She'd spent the flight reviewing Kane's intelligence, building a mental map of the Kozlov operation in Alaska. They'd been surprisingly bold, establishing a legitimate front through a shipping company that moved cargo between Anchorage and the lower 48. The perfect cover for smuggling everything from drugs to weapons to people. Her secure phone buzzed with an update from Kane, Kozlov lieutenant spotted at Tanana Valley Freight. Mikhail Petrov, arms dealer. Approach with extreme caution. Vera memorized the address and deleted the message. Tanana Valley Freight. She'd start there. Morrison set the Cessna down on a private airstrip north of Fairbanks, snow spraying from the wings as they touched ground. You sure you don't want me to wait? He asked as Vera gathered her gear. Gets lonely out here at night. I'm used to lonely. She walked across the frozen tarmac to where a rental car waited, another of Kane's arrangements. The Ford Explorer was equipped with winter tires and emergency gear, anonymous enough to blend in while robust enough for whatever the night might bring. Fairbanks looked different than she remembered from brief visits years ago. Bigger, more developed, but still carrying that frontier edge that marked all Alaskan cities. People here understood that civilization was a thin veneer over something wilder and more primal. Tanana Valley Freight occupied a sprawling complex on the industrial side of town, surrounded by chain link and razor wire. Security cameras tracked her as she drove past, conducting casual reconnaissance. 3 loading docks, 2 main buildings, and what looked like residential quarters attached to the rear structure. She parked 6 blocks away and approached on foot, using shadows and industrial debris for cover. The skills came back gradually: how to move without creating sound, how to read building layouts from external observation, how to identify security weaknesses. The freight company's legitimate business had ended hours ago, but lights still burned in the office building. Through thermal imaging scope she'd liberated from her cabin's emergency cache, Vera counted 7 heat signatures. 2 guards patrolling the perimeter, 3 clustered in what appeared to be a break room, and 2 more in an upstairs office. No sign of Autumn. She circled the complex twice, mapping entry points and escape routes. The Kozlovs had chosen well. The location offered multiple evacuation options while remaining isolated enough for questionable activities. Her phone vibrated with an encrypted message. Girl confirmed alive. Holding location unknown. Petrov expecting contact from higher authority tonight. Which meant she had a narrow window to extract information before the situation potentially deteriorated. Vera settled into position behind a shipping container with clear sight lines to the main building. Patience had always been her greatest weapon, the ability to wait, to watch, to strike at the perfect moment. At 11:47 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled through the freight company's gates. 2 men emerged. The driver, built like a linebacker, and a smaller figure in an expensive coat. Even at distance, Vera recognized Mikhail Petrov from Kane's files. Mid-40s, former Spetsnaz, with a reputation for creative violence. She watched them enter the building, then began her approach. The exterior guard was checking the north perimeter when Vera came over the fence. She moved through shadows cast by sodium lights, reaching the building's service entrance without triggering visible alarms. The lock was electronic but old, vulnerable to the signal interceptor she'd packed. 30 seconds later, she was inside. The building's layout matched her external assessment. Loading areas on the ground floor, offices above. She could hear voices from the upper-level Russian, speaking about shipping schedules and payment transfers. Vera climbed the service stairs with absolute silence, each step calculated to avoid creaking metal. The voices grew clearer as she reached the second floor. Told you, the girl is safe. But Dmitri wants proof that Phoenix is coming. And if she doesn't, then we proceed to Phase 2. Vera's blood chilled. Phase 2 meant Autumn was expendable. She located the source of the voices. A conference room with frosted glass windows. 2 figures visible as shadows against the light. Petrov and one other, probably local muscle. The hallway offered no cover for a direct approach. But the ventilation system. Vera found an access panel 20 feet down the corridor. The ductwork was newer than the building, probably installed during a recent renovation. She removed the panel and slipped inside, grateful for years of wilderness living that had kept her lean and flexible. The metal conduit carried sound clearly as she crawled toward the conference room. She could hear Petrov dictating orders into a phone. Tell Dmitri that Phoenix will come. A mother always comes for her child. And when she does, we'll be ready. A pause, then. The cabin in the Chugash Mountains is prepared. Isolated. Defensible. When Phoenix makes contact, we'll move the girl there for the final exchange. Chugash Mountains. Vera filed the information away, continuing to listen. How long do we wait? The second voice asked. Dmitri gives her 72 hours from the initial contact. After that, Petrov's voice carried a shrug. The girl becomes a liability. Vera had heard enough. She began backing through the ductwork toward the access panel, mind already calculating her next moves. The Chugash Mountains were vast, but a defensible cabin suggested limited options. She needed to locate the exact site before. The metal beneath her shifted with a sharp crack. Silence fell in the conference room below. What was that? The second voice asked. Vera froze, barely breathing. Sometimes the best response to discovery was absolute stillness, becoming invisible through immobility. Footsteps moved across the room below. Then the distinctive sound of a weapon being drawn. Check the vents, Petrov ordered. Vera began moving again. Faster now, precision abandoned for speed. She reached the access panel as she heard someone entering the hallway below. There, the voice called. The panel's been removed. Vera dropped into the hallway as shouts erupted behind her. She sprinted for the service stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Behind her, she heard Petrov barking orders in Russian, coordinating a response. The loading dock was 50 feet away when the first gunshot echoed through the building. Vera burst through the service door as security floodlights blazed to life, turning the freight yard into harsh daylight. The perimeter guards were converging on her position, automatic weapons raised. She dove behind a forklift as bullets sparked off concrete around her. Her own weapon was in her hand now, the Glock's familiar weight steady and reassuring. The first guard came around the forklift low and fast, professionally trained but expecting a civilian target. Vera's double tap caught him center mass before he could bring his rifle to bear. The second guard tried to flank her position, using a shipping container for cover. But Vera had already moved, rolling under a truck trailer and emerging behind him. He went down without firing a shot. Sirens wailed in the distance, either police responding to gunfire or Kozlov reinforcements. Either way, Vera's window for intelligence gathering had closed. She reached her rental car as the first police cruiser rounded the corner 6 blocks away, emergency lights painting the night in reds and blues. By the time they reached the freight company, she was 3 miles away, already planning her approach to the Chugash Mountains. She'd learned what she needed. Autumn was alive, and Vera had less than 72 hours to find her. The hunt had begun in earnest. The Chugash Mountains rose like frozen giants against the dawn sky, their peaks disappearing into low clouds that promised more snow. Vera studied the terrain through binoculars from a ridgeline 5 miles south of her target area, mapping the approaches and escape routes with tactical precision. She'd spent the previous day gathering intelligence on the Kozlov safe house. Kane's contacts had provided satellite imagery showing a remote cabin complex accessed by a single dirt road, now buried under 3 feet of snow. The location was strategically chosen, defensible, isolated, and nearly impossible to approach without being detected. Nearly impossible. Vera shouldered her pack and began the descent into the valley. She'd abandoned the rental car 20 miles back, switching to cross-country skis and winter camping gear. The Kozlovs would be watching road access and monitoring electronic communications. But they'd be thinking like criminals, not like soldiers. They wouldn't expect someone to spend 2 days crossing wilderness in sub-zero temperatures for a single approach. The terrain was brutal, even by Alaskan standards. Steep grades, unstable snow conditions, and temperatures that had dropped to -30 during the night. Vera's military training had prepared her for extreme environments, but she felt every one of her 42 years in the burn of her lungs and the ache of her joints. She stopped every hour to check her position and scan for pursuit. The valley stretched empty around her, wind carving abstract patterns in the snow. No signs of human presence except for her own tracks, already being erased by the falling snow. By afternoon, she'd reached the treeline above the target cabin. Through her scope, she could see the complex clearly, a main building with smoke rising from the chimney, 2 smaller outbuildings, and what appeared to be a generator shed. Solar panels on the roof caught weak sunlight filtering through the clouds. 3 men were visible in the compound. One patrolling the perimeter with casual alertness, 2 others moving between buildings. All armed, all professional in their movements. And there, in a second-floor window of the main building, a flash of movement that made Vera's breath catch. A girl. Dark hair, pale face pressed against the glass for just a moment before disappearing back into the room. Autumn. Vera settled into a sniper's hide among the pine trees, using natural camouflage and her winter gear to become invisible against the forest backdrop. She would watch, learn the guards' patterns, and wait for the right moment. Hours passed. The guards rotated shifts every 2 hours, maintaining good discipline but showing signs of boredom. They were expecting trouble from the road, not from the wilderness. Their positioning and patrol routes reflected that assumption. As darkness fell, lights came on in the main building. Vera switched to thermal imaging and counted heat signatures, for in total, 3 adults and 1 smaller figure that had to be Autumn. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Kane, Kozlov deadline in 18 hours. Extraction window closing. 18 hours. Not enough time for a prolonged siege or complex operation. She would have to move tonight in darkness and storm. Vera began her final approach at midnight, when the wind was howling loudest and visibility was near zero. She left her pack in the hide, carrying only essential gear, weapons, medical supplies, and thermal charges for creating diversions. The compound's single guard was sheltering against the generator shed, stamping his feet and blowing on his hands. Human nature, seeking warmth and comfort even in tactical situations. Vera used the storm's noise to mask her approach, reaching the main building's blind side without detection. The structure was well built but showed signs of hasty winterization. Gaps around windows, inadequate insulation in the foundation. She found what she was looking for on the building's north side, a basement window partially hidden by snow drift. The lock was simple, the glass single pane. She removed the pane with glass cutting tools, creating an opening just large enough to squeeze through. The basement was dark, cold, and cluttered with supplies. Vera oriented herself using the building's layout, locating the stairway to the main floor. She could hear voices above, Russian again, discussing shift changes and meal preparation. The stairs were solid wood, well constructed. She climbed slowly, testing each step for creaks and groans. At the top, she paused at the door listening. Temperature dropping again. Generators working overtime. Dmitri wants us ready to move at first light if Phoenix doesn't make contact. And the girl? Orders are orders. Vera's jaw tightened. She eased the door open, revealing a rustic kitchen and living area. 2 men sat at a table playing cards, Kalashnikov rifles propped nearby. A third was visible through a doorway, watching a small television. None were watching the stairs. She moved through the kitchen like smoke, reaching the main stairway without detection. The second floor had 3 rooms, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Light showed under one door, darkness under the others. Vera approached the lighted room, pressing her ear to the door. She could hear movement inside, soft footsteps on wooden flooring. She tested the handle. Locked, but not with anything more sophisticated than a simple deadbolt. Her lockpicks made quick work of the mechanism. The door opened to reveal a small bedroom furnished with military surplus furniture. A narrow bed, a desk, a single chair. And sitting on the bed, staring at the door with enormous dark eyes, was Autumn Mackenzie. The girl was smaller than her photos had suggested, thin in the way of teenagers who grew too fast. She wore jeans and a heavy sweater, hiking boots that looked too big for her feet. Her dark hair hung past her shoulders, framing a face that was undeniably familiar. "Don't scream," Vera whispered, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I'm here to get you out." Autumn's eyes tracked Vera's movements, taking in the weapons, the tactical gear, the absolute confidence of someone comfortable with violence. "Who are you?" she asked, voice steady despite the circumstances. "Someone who's going to keep you safe." Vera moved to the window, checking the view of the compound. "Are you hurt?" "No. They've been treating me okay." "Scared, but okay." Autumn stood from the bed, moving with surprising composure. "Are you a cop?" "No." "FBI?" "No." "Then who?" A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside. Vera motioned for silence, drawing her sidearm as footsteps approached the door. She positioned herself beside the entrance, waiting. The handle turned slowly. "Little bird," a voice called in accented English. "Time for evening meal." When no response came, the door swung open. The guards stepped into the room, Kalashnikov at ready position, scanning for threats. He never saw Vera behind the door. Her knife took him under the ribs, angled up toward the heart. He dropped without a sound, weapon clattering to the floor. Autumn pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "We're leaving," Vera said, checking the hallway. "Now." She led Autumn to the window, which opened onto a snow-covered roof over the building's single-story section. "Can you climb?" The girl nodded, though her face was pale. "Stay close to me. Step where I step. And no matter what happens, keep moving." They went out the window into the howling storm, wind immediately cutting through their clothes like razors. Vera led Autumn across the roof to its edge, then dropped to the snow below. The compound's lights were still on, but the storm provided perfect concealment. They were 20 yards from the building when shouts erupted behind them. "Go," Vera commanded, pushing Autumn toward the treeline. "Run." Behind them, the compound exploded into activity. Floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the swirling snow. Men's voices called out in Russian, coordinating a search. Vera and Autumn reached the forest as the first shots rang out, bullets whining through the trees around them. Vera returned fire, 3 round bursts aimed at the floodlights, plunging sections of the compound back into darkness. "This way," she called to Autumn, leading her deeper into the forest toward the cache of supplies she'd prepared. They climbed through snow and underbrush for 15 minutes before Vera called a halt. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit had faded, masked by wind and distance. "Are you okay?" she asked Autumn, who was breathing hard but keeping up admirably. "I think so." The girl studied Vera's face in the darkness. "You're not going to tell me who you are you? Does it matter?" "Those men, they said they were waiting for someone called Phoenix. They said she would come for me." Autumn's voice was thoughtful, intelligent. "That's you, isn't it?" Vera shouldered her pack, checking their back trail one more time. "We need to keep moving. I have supplies cached 2 miles north of here." "You didn't answer my question." "No," Vera said quietly. "I didn't." They climbed through the storm-lashed forest, mother and daughter together for the first time in 16 years, neither knowing how to bridge the gap between what was and what might have been. Behind them, the compound's lights grew distant, but Vera knew the Kozlovs wouldn't give up easily. They had vehicles, communications, and local knowledge. The rail chase was just beginning. The emergency shelter was invisible until you were standing directly in front of it, a natural cave system that Vera had discovered during her reconnaissance, enlarged and reinforced with stolen military surplus. She'd spent hours preparing the site with supplies, weapons, and communication equipment. Inside, she directed Autumn, who hesitated at the cave mouth. "How do I know you're not just another kidnapper?" It was a fair question. Vera turned to face the girl, seeing intelligence and wariness in equal measure. "You don't. But those men back there will kill you to send a message." "I won't." Autumn studied her for a long moment, then nodded and entered the cave. The interior was larger than it appeared from outside, with a thermal barrier rigged near the entrance to contain heat and mask their signature. Battery-powered LED lanterns provided steady light, and a small camping stove offered the promise of warmth. "This is impressive," Autumn said, examining the setup. "You planned this." "I planned for multiple contingencies." Vera activated a signal jammer that would interfere with electronic tracking, then began checking their equipment. Food for 3 days, water purification tablets, medical supplies, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. "Sit," she told Autumn, gesturing to a sleeping bag laid out near the stove. "Eat something. We'll be moving again in 4 hours." Autumn accepted an MRE and began eating mechanically, her eyes never leaving Vera. "You move like a soldier." "I was once. And now I'm someone trying to keep you alive." They ate in relative silence, the only sounds the wind outside and the steady hum of the signal jammer. Vera monitored radio frequencies on a tactical scanner, listening for signs of Kozlov's search teams. They mentioned my birth mother, Autumn said suddenly. The men who took me. They said she was coming. Vera's hands stilled on the radio controls. What did they tell you? That she was alive. That she would come for me. Autumn's voice was carefully neutral. My adoptive parents told me she died when I was born. Parents lie sometimes. To protect their children. Is that what you're doing? Protecting me. Vera met the girl's eyes across the cave. In them, she saw her own stubborn intelligence, her own refusal to accept easy answers. Yes. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Vera could offer platitudes about duty or professional obligation. She could maintain the fiction that she was just another soldier following orders. Instead, she told the truth. Because you're my daughter. Autumn went very still. For a long moment, the only sound was wind howling across the cave mouth. You're lying. I'm not. Prove it. Vera reached into her pack and withdrew a manila envelope, its contents protected by waterproof casing. Inside were documents she'd carried for 16 years but never looked at, birth certificates, hospital records, and a single photograph. She handed the photo to Autumn. It showed a younger Vera holding a newborn baby, both of them in a hospital bed. The woman in the picture looked exhausted but fierce, protective even in that moment of separation. Autumn stared at the image for a full minute. This could be faked. It could be. But it's not. Why? Autumn's voice was small, now vulnerable. Why did you give me away? Vera had asked herself the same question 10,000 times over the years. The answers were complicated, layered with choices that had seemed necessary at the time. Because I was a killer, she said simply. And killers don't get to keep the things they love. Autumn absorbed this, turning the photograph over in her hands. But you came for me now. Yes. So what changed? Nothing. Everything. Vera checked the radio again, noting increased chatter on Kozlov frequencies. I'm still a killer. But sometimes that's what love looks like. The radio crackled with Russian voices, closer than before. Vera made quick calculations. They'd been stationary too long, and the Kozlovs were professionals. They would find the cave eventually. We need to move, she said, beginning to pack their gear. Where? There's an airstrip 40 miles east. I have extraction arranged for dawn. And until then, we stay ahead of people who want to kill us both. Autumn helped pack without being asked, moving efficiently despite her obvious emotional turmoil. Good instincts, Vera noted. Survival skills that might have been inherited or might have been learned through 16 years of navigating the world without biological parents. They left the cave as snow began falling again, heavy flakes that would help obscure their trail but make travel more difficult. Vera led them north initially, establishing a false trail before doubling back toward their actual destination. How many are hunting us? Autumn asked as they climbed through dense forest. At least 6. Probably more by now. What are our chances? Vera considered lying, offering false comfort. But the girl deserved honesty. Depends how smart they are, how well they know this terrain, and how badly they want us dead. And they're smart, they know the terrain, and they very badly want us dead. Despite everything, Autumn smiled. You're not much for sugarcoating, are you? Would you prefer lies? No. I prefer knowing what I'm dealing with. They were definitely related. They traveled for 2 hours before Vera called a halt, using thermal imaging to scan their back trail. Heat signatures were moving through the forest behind them, maybe a mile back but closing steadily. They're tracking us, she told Autumn. How? Dogs, probably. Or infrared from helicopters. Vera studied the terrain ahead, calculating options. We need to break contact. She led them to a steep ravine carved by spring snowmelt, its bottom filled with boulders and fallen trees. Treacherous footing. but it would mask their heat signature and confuse tracking animals. Stay on the rocks, Vera instructed. Avoid snow and soft ground. They picked their way down the ravine for a mile, moving slowly to avoid falls that could cripple or kill. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded as their hunters lost the trail. Military training? Autumn asked when they finally climbed out of the ravine. Special forces. Long time ago. What kind of missions? The kind that don't officially exist. They reached a frozen stream that would provide natural concealment and easier travel. Vera tested the ice carefully before leading them onto its surface. Is that how you met my father? The question caught Vera off guard. She'd spent years avoiding thoughts of David Chen, the intelligence analyst whose quiet competence had somehow penetrated defenses she'd thought were impregnable. We worked together, she said finally. Was he military too? CIA, analyst, not field operative. Is he alive? No. They walked in silence for several minutes, their footsteps muffled by snow covering the ice. What happened to him? Autumn asked eventually. Car bomb. Prague, 2009. Because of the same people who took me? Related organizations. Your father was investigating arms dealers, following money trails. He got too close to something important. And you killed the people responsible. It wasn't a question. Autumn had already put the pieces together. Yes. All of them. I thought so. Apparently I missed some. They'd reached a bend in the stream where fallen trees created natural cover. Vera called a halt, checking their position and scanning for pursuit. Do you regret it? Autumn asked. Giving me away? Vera looked at her daughter, really looked at her for the first time. The girl was beautiful in an understated way, with David's thoughtful eyes and her own stubborn chin. She moved with unconscious grace and had adapted to their desperate circumstances with remarkable composure. Every day, Vera said quietly. Then why? Because I loved you. Because I wanted you to have a chance at a normal life. Did it work? Vera studied Autumn's face, seeing strength and intelligence and a core of steel that reminded her painfully of herself at that age. You tell me. Autumn smiled, and for a moment she looked like the child Vera had never known. I had good parents. They loved me. I played soccer, got decent grades, worried about normal teenage things. She paused. But I always felt like something was missing. I'm sorry. Don't be. You made the right choice. The radio in Vera's pack crackled with new transmissions. She listened carefully, translating the rapid Russian. They've found the cave, she said grimly. And they're bringing in reinforcements from Anchorage. How many? Too many. Vera shouldered her pack and checked her weapon. The extraction point was still 20 miles away, and dawn was 6 hours off. They needed to move faster, but the terrain ahead was even more challenging. Open tundra where they'd be visible to aircraft. Change of plans, she said. We're going to steal their transportation. The Kozlov forward camp was a textbook operation. 3 SUVs arranged in a defensive triangle, communications equipment, and enough firepower to level a small building. They'd chosen their position well, a clearing that offered good visibility and multiple escape routes. They'd made one mistake, though. They'd assumed Phoenix would run. Vera studied the camp through her scope from a ridge 800 yards away. 6 men visible, all armed and alert. Thermal imaging showed 2 more in the vehicles, probably monitoring communications. 8 targets, she told Autumn, who was crouched beside her behind a fallen log. You're going to attack 8 armed men? Not attack. Eliminate. The distinction was important. An attack implied confrontation, noise, chaos. Elimination was surgical, efficient, silent until it was too late for the targets to respond effectively. What do I do? Stay here. Stay hidden. If something goes wrong, head east to the extraction point and wait for pickup. What if you don't come back? Vera met her daughter's eyes. Then you live the life I wanted you to have. She handed Autumn the radio and a backup weapon, a compact pistol with 3 magazines. Safety's here. Point and shoot if anyone tries to hurt you. Don't hesitate. Autumn took the weapon with steady hands. Will you teach me? Properly, I mean. After this is over. We'll see. Vera began her approach using a dry stream bed that wound through the valley floor. The snow had stopped, leaving crystal clear air that carried sound for miles. She moved like a ghost, each step calculated to avoid noise or visible disturbance. The first sentry was positioned on the camp's north side, smoking a cigarette despite the cold. Professional enough to maintain his watch, but human enough to seek small comforts. Vera reached him from his blind side, knife sliding between ribs before he could cry out. 1 down. The second sentry was more alert, scanning the tree line with night vision goggles. But he was looking for movement at distance, not for threats already inside his perimeter. Vera's garrote took him silently, his body lowering to the snow without sound. 2 down. The third man was harder, positioned near the communications vehicle with clear sight lines in multiple directions. Vera waited for him to turn away, then covered 60 feet of open ground in complete silence. The suppressed pistol coughed once, and he slumped over his equipment. 3 down. Pavel, a voice called from one of the SUVs. Radio check. When no answer came, the voice called again, sharper now. Pavel respond. Vera saw movement in the vehicles, men reaching for weapons. The element of surprise was fading. She triggered the thermal charges she'd planted during her approach, creating explosions on the camp's far side that sent the remaining men scrambling for cover. In the confusion, she moved through their positions like death itself, exploiting the chaos she'd created. The fourth man died trying to reach his rifle. The fifth never saw her coming. The sixth managed to get off a single wild shot before Vera's blade found his throat. The seventh man was smarter, or luckier. He'd taken cover behind an engine block and was laying down suppressing fire with an automatic weapon, keeping Vera pinned while he called for backup on his radio. Phoenix is here, he shouted in Russian. Repeat, Phoenix is engaging our position. Vera flanked him using one of the SUVs for cover, but he'd anticipated the move. His burst caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her tumbling into the snow. The impact drove the breath from her lungs and sent fire racing down her arm. She rolled behind cover as more bullets sparked off metal around her. Blood was spreading through her jacket, hot against the cold air. The wound was painful but not immediately life-threatening. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major arteries. But it slowed her down, and the seventh man was advancing now, confident that he'd gained the upper hand. Come out, Phoenix, he called in accented English. Make this easy on yourself. Vera checked her ammunition. 2 rounds left in the pistol, 1 magazine remaining. Against a professional with superior position and automatic weapons. She closed her eyes, centering herself the way her instructors had taught her 20 years ago. Combat wasn't about strength or speed or firepower. It was about will, about the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The man was moving carefully around the SUV, weapon at ready position. Good technique, professional movement. But he'd made one crucial error. He'd forgotten about the thermal charges. Vera triggered the final explosive, positioned under the fuel tank of the nearest vehicle. The blast sent a fireball into the sky, showering the camp with burning debris and turning night into day. The man dove for cover, temporarily blinded by the explosion. Vera was already moving, using the chaos to close distance. Her knife took him under the arm as he tried to bring his weapon around. 7 down. The 8th man had stayed in his vehicle, engine running, ready to evacuate if the situation deteriorated. Smart, professional, and unfortunately for him, predictable. Vera approached the SUV from its blind side, using burning wreckage for concealment. The driver was speaking rapidly into a radio, probably calling for immediate extraction. She put 2 rounds through the side window. 8 down. The camp was hers, but she was bleeding freely now and could hear aircraft in the distance, helicopter rotors cutting through the night air. Reinforcements arriving faster than expected. Vera hot-wired one of the undamaged SUVs and drove it back toward Autumn's position. The girl emerged from cover as she approached, weapon ready but lowered when she recognized the vehicle. "You're hurt," Autumn said, noticing the blood. "I'll live. Get in." They drove east through the wilderness, following game trails and maintenance roads that wouldn't appear on most maps. Behind them, the camp burned like a beacon, and helicopter searchlights swept the forest. "How did you do that?" Autumn asked as Vera navigated around a fallen tree. "Training. Experience. Look, you killed 8 people." "Yes." "Does it bother you?" Vera considered the question. She'd killed 47 people over her career, each death catalogued and remembered. Some had been necessary, some justified, some simply expedient. "It bothers me that it had to happen," she said finally. "It doesn't bother me that they're dead." They drove in silence for several miles, the SUV's heater fighting against the cold air rushing through bullet holes in the windows. "The extraction point," Autumn said eventually. "What happens after that?" "You go back to your life." "I disappear again." "What if I don't want that?" "It's not about what you want. It's about keeping you safe." "From what?" "You eliminated the threat." "I eliminated some of the threat. The Kozlov organization has resources, connections, money. They'll send more people. Then teach me to fight them." Vera glanced at her daughter, seeing determination that matched her own. "You don't want that life." "How do you know what I want?" "Because I know what that life costs." They'd reached the extraction point, a frozen lake where a bush pilot would land at dawn. Vera parked the SUV in a stand of trees and began checking her equipment. The helicopter sounds were closer now, and she could see lights moving through the forest behind them. The Kozlovs were tracking them, probably using the SUV's GPS or following the heat signature. "They're still coming," she told Autumn. "How long until pickup?" 3 hours. "Can we hold them off that long?" Vera assessed their position. The lake offered good fields of fire but no cover. The treeline provided concealment but limited escape routes. They had ammunition for maybe one serious engagement. "Maybe," she said. "If we're smart and they're stupid. And if they're smart too, then we die together." Autumn smiled at that, and Vera realized her daughter had inherited more than just her looks. "You know what?" Autumn said, checking her weapon the way Vera had taught her. "I can think of worse ways to go." The Kozlov assault came with the first light of dawn, coordinated and professional. 3 teams advancing from different directions while a helicopter provided overwatch and fire support. Vera had used the intervening hours to prepare their position as well as possible. Improvised explosive devices made from their remaining thermal charges, positioned to channel the attack into predetermined killing zones. Concealed firing positions that offered protection and multiple escape routes. Everything her training had taught her about defensive operations. It wouldn't be enough. 12 men minimum, she told Autumn, watching the assault teams through her scope. Plus the helicopter crew. 14 against 2. Those are better odds than I've had before. Autumn laughed despite their circumstances. "You're insane." "Probably." The first team reached the treeline 600 yards away. Professional movement. Good spacing. Excellent cover discipline. These weren't street thugs or amateurs. They were military-trained operators with experience in small unit tactics. "When this starts," Vera said, "stay low. Choose your targets carefully and don't waste ammunition." "What about the helicopter?" "Leave that to me." The aircraft was an old Soviet design, probably military surplus converted for civilian use. Armored, but not heavily. Vulnerable to the right kind of attack if she could get close enough. The assault began with suppressing fire from the helicopter's door gun, heavy rounds chewing up the frozen ground around their position. Vera and Autumn pressed themselves into the shallow foxholes they'd scraped from the permafrost. The first assault team moved under cover of the helicopter fire, advancing by bounds toward their position. Good tactics, well executed. Vera waited until they hit her first improvised explosive, positioned 200 yards out. The blast took down 2 men and scattered the rest, buying precious time. Now, she said, opening fire with measured shots. Her first round took the team leader. Her second dropped the automatic weapons specialist. Autumn's pistol cracked beside her, the girl firing carefully aimed shots at visible targets. The attack stalled as the Kozlovs sought cover, but Vera knew it was only temporary. They were probing her defenses, learning her capabilities. The real assault would come from multiple directions simultaneously. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission. Phoenix, this is Eagle. ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. If they could hold for 15 minutes, extraction was possible. The second team hit their position from the north, using the helicopter's fire to mask their approach. Vera's second explosive device caught them in the open, but 3 men made it to effective range before going to ground. Automatic weapons fire shredded the trees around their position. Bark and splinters filled the air like shrapnel, forcing Vera and Autumn deeper into their holes. I'm hit, Autumn said, her voice tight with pain. Vera looked over to see blood spreading across her daughter's jacket. A grazing wound along her ribs. Painful but not immediately dangerous. How bad? I'll live. The girl was still firing, her shots carefully aimed despite the wound. Good training, or maybe just good genes. The third team was moving now, flanking their position from the east while the helicopter repositioned for a better angle of attack. Classic envelopment tactics, designed to overwhelm defenders through multiple simultaneous threats. Vera's ammunition was running low. 6 rounds left in her current magazine, 2 magazines remaining. Not enough for a prolonged engagement against superior numbers. Time for desperate measures. Cover me, she told Autumn, then broke from their position and sprinted toward the lake. The helicopter pilot saw her coming and swung around to engage, door gunner laying down suppressing fire. But Vera had anticipated the move, using the aircraft's own tactics against it. The pilot had to choose between maintaining altitude and getting a clear shot. He chose the shot, bringing the helicopter lower to give his gunner a better angle. Vera had been counting on that choice. She reached the lake's edge as the helicopter passed overhead, rotors whipping snow into blinding clouds. Her last thermal charge was already armed and ready. The pilot realized his mistake too late. Vera's throw was perfect, the explosive device landing in the helicopter's open cargo bay. She dove into the snow as the aircraft passed over her. The explosion tore through the helicopter's cabin, sending it spinning out of control toward the frozen lake. It hit the ice with tremendous force, the impact cracking the surface and sending the wreckage through into the dark water below. But the effort had cost her. Vera lay in the snow, her shoulder wound bleeding freely, strength flowing out of her with each heartbeat. The assault teams were closing in from 2 directions, and she was too far from cover to reach Autumn's position. She could hear her daughter's pistol still firing, the shots coming slower now as ammunition ran low. This was how it ended, then. On a frozen lake in Alaska, mother and daughter fighting together against impossible odds. At least they'd die as family. Phoenix, this is Eagle. I have visual on your position. The bush pilot's voice crackled through her radio as a small aircraft appeared over the tree line, flying low and fast. The plane was built for rough conditions. Oversized tires, reinforced landing gear, powerful engine capable of short takeoff and landing operations. The pilot brought his aircraft down on the lake ice in a landing that would have been impossible for most aviators. Snow and ice sprayed from the wheels as he touched down, then spun the plane around to face back toward takeoff position. Move, the pilot's voice commanded. I can't stay long. Vera pushed herself to her feet and stumbled toward Autumn's position. The remaining Kozlov operatives were closing in, but the pilot was laying down, covering fire from the aircraft's mounted weapons. Come on, Vera called to her daughter. Autumn emerged from cover, bleeding but mobile. Together they ran across the open ground toward the waiting aircraft, bullets snapping past them as the Kozlovs attempted to prevent their escape. They reached the plane as its engine roared to full power. The pilot, a grizzled man in his 60s with steady hands and calm eyes, helped them into the cabin. Hold on, he said, releasing the brakes. The aircraft accelerated across the ice, gaining speed rapidly. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit the treeline as the Kozlovs fired everything they had at the escaping plane. A bullet spiderwebbed the rear window. Another punched through the fuselage near Vera's head. Then they were airborne, climbing rapidly away from the lake and the men who wanted them dead. Where to? The pilot asked over the engine noise. Somewhere safe, Vera said, holding pressure against Autumn's wound. Safe's a relative concept in Alaska. Then somewhere far. The pilot nodded and banked south, toward Anchorage and civilization, and the possibility of a future neither Vera nor Autumn had dared imagine just hours before. Below them, the wilderness stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful, terrible, and indifferent to human struggles. But for the first time in years, Vera felt something other than the weight of past choices. She felt hope. 6 months later, Vera stood on the deck of a small cabin overlooking Prince William Sound, watching Autumn practice with a compound bow. The girl had taken to archery with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, and her accuracy was improving rapidly. Higher, Vera called. Trust the sight picture. Autumn adjusted her aim and released. The arrow thudded into the target's outer ring, closer to center than her previous attempts. Better. Not good enough. It will be. They'd found this place through one of Kane's contacts, a former CIA safe house that had been decommissioned and sold to private parties. Remote enough for security, comfortable enough for healing. A place where they could begin to build something resembling a normal relationship. It wasn't easy. 16 years of separation couldn't be erased in a few months, and both of them carried scars that went deeper than the physical wounds they'd sustained in Alaska. But they were learning each other gradually. Shared meals, long conversations, and training sessions that served as both practical education and emotional connection. Autumn had returned to school in Anchorage, living with a carefully vetted host family during the week and spending weekends at the cabin. She'd adjusted remarkably well to the revelation about her parentage, but Vera suspected the girl was still processing the full implications of having a mother who killed people for a living. Former living, Vera corrected herself. She'd submitted her official resignation to Kane the day after their extraction, ending a career that had defined her adult life. The transition to civilian existence was proving more difficult than any mission she'd ever undertaken. Mom. Vera looked up at the word, still startled by it even after months of hearing it. There's someone coming up the road. A black SUV was winding its way along the coastal highway toward their turnoff. Vera automatically cataloged defensive positions and escape routes before forcing herself to relax. Old habits died hard. The vehicle turned into their driveway and stopped near the cabin. Director Kane emerged from the passenger side, looking older than when Vera had last seen him, but moving with the same careful precision. Sir, Vera said as he approached. Vera, you look domestic. She glanced down at her flannel shirt and jeans, mud on her boots from working in the garden. I'm adapting. Kane's eyes found Autumn, who was watching the exchange with obvious curiosity. You must be Autumn. I've heard a great deal about you. You're the one who found me in Alaska, Autumn said. It wasn't a question. I helped. Your mother did the hard part. What do you want, Kane? Vera asked. To talk. about the future. They moved inside, where Vera poured coffee while Kane admired the view from the main window. Autumn excused herself to work on homework, but Vera noticed she positioned herself where she could overhear their conversation. Smart girl. The Kozlov situation has been resolved, Kane said without preamble. Dmitri was killed in a power struggle 2 weeks ago. The organization has fragmented, and our intelligence suggests the remaining factions have moved on to more profitable concerns. Good. You're safe, both of you. The threat has passed. Vera nodded, unsurprised. She'd been monitoring intelligence reports through back channels, watching for signs of renewed interest in Phoenix or her daughter. There's something else, Kane continued. A consulting position. Freelance work, strictly advisory. Training programs for our people, tactical analysis, the occasional field assessment. I'm retired. I know. But your expertise is valuable, and the work would be flexible. Compatible with your current lifestyle. Vera glanced toward Autumn, who was pretending to focus on her textbook. What kind of consulting? Nothing that would require extended travel or significant risk. Desk work, mostly. Some teaching at the facility in Langley. Helping our people avoid the mistakes that previous generations made. It was tempting. Vera missed the intellectual challenge of intelligence work, the sense of purpose that came from protecting national interests. But she'd made a commitment to building a different kind of life. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Kane finished his coffee and stood to leave. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Both times. After he left, Autumn looked up from her homework. Are you going to take the job? I don't know. What do you think? I think you need something to do besides worry about me. Vera smiled. I don't worry about you. You check the security systems 6 times a day and keep weapons hidden in every room. That's not worry. That's preparation. What's the difference? Worry is emotional. Preparation is practical. Autumn laughed. You're going to take the job. Probably. That evening, they sat on the deck watching the sun set over the Sound. The water was calm, reflecting pink and gold light in long streamers that stretched toward the horizon. Do you ever miss it? Autumn asked. The excitement, I mean. The danger. Sometimes, Vera admitted. But I don't miss the loneliness. Were you lonely before? When you lived in the wilderness? I told myself I wasn't. But yes. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fishing boats return to harbor in the distance. I want to learn more, Autumn said eventually. More what? Everything. Fighting, tactics, survival skills. I want to understand your world. It's not a world you should want to understand, but it's part of who you are, which makes it part of who I am. Vera looked at her daughter, really looked at her. The girl had grown in the past 6 months, not just physically but emotionally. The experience in Alaska had marked her, changed her in ways that might not become apparent for years. It's a hard life, Vera said. So is any life worth living. Where did you learn that? From my mother. Vera smiled, feeling something settle into place inside her chest. A sense of completion she hadn't realized she'd been missing. All right, she said. We'll start with advanced marksmanship tomorrow. Really? Really? But you have to promise me something. What? That you'll use what I teach you to protect people, not to hurt them. I promise. As darkness fell over Prince William Sound, mother and daughter sat together on their deck, planning a future neither had imagined possible just months before. Around them, the Alaskan wilderness stretched in all directions, vast, beautiful, and full of possibilities. For the first time in years, Vera Blackwood was exactly where she belonged. The end. We encourage you to like and subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed the video. Please share your thoughts in the comments section and explore our channel for a diverse range of content, including audiobooks, murder mysteries, psychological thrillers, and classic novels. We strive to provide comprehensive and engaging storytelling experiences. Your visit is highly appreciated, and we are confident you will find content to your liking.